To the outside world, my father was a titan of Austin real estate, a pillar of the community. To me, he was the man who broke me. After he and my brother framed me to cover up their own corruption, they cast me out with nothing but the clothes on my back. They labeled me a failure and made sure the world believed it. For years, I believed it too. But I rebuilt my life from the ashes, piece by painful piece. And when they came crawling back expecting me to save them, they had no idea who I had become. They wanted a savior. What they got was a reckoning. This isn't just a revenge story. It's the story of a meticulous financial crime investigation that exposed a web of lies decades in the making. This is the story of how I took back my life. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. Ethan, in his late 20s. He's in a simple, well-lit room, looking directly into the camera. He takes a slow breath before he speaks, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel. You know, there's a certain kind of quiet that only exists in a house you've earned. Not a house you were given, not a house you inherited, a house you bled for. It's the silence of solid floors under your feet, of walls that have only ever heard your voice, your music, your peace. For the last 5 years, that silence has been my sanctuary, my reward. Last Tuesday, that silence was shattered. It was just after 7 p.m., the Texas sun was starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky outside my Austin office window in those bruised shades of purple and orange. I was just packing up, thinking about what I'd make for dinner, when my phone buzzed. It was an unsaved number, but the area code was local. I almost ignored it. I'm glad I didn't. I answered, and a voice I hadn't heard in a decade slithered through the speaker. Ethan, it's Cole, my older brother, the golden son, the heir to our father's throne. My brain short-circuited for a second. It was like hearing a ghost you'd spent years convincing yourself was never real to begin with. We need to talk, he said, his voice slick with that practiced, effortless charm he always had. Dad and we're in town. We were hoping we could stop by. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my briefcase in my hand, looking at the city lights twinkling to life. Austin, the city they'd run me out of. The city I'd sworn I'd never return to, until I could own a piece of it they could never touch. Ethan? You there? Where are you? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion I could manage. He told me they were at a hotel downtown, just a few blocks from my office building, the one with my name on the lease. He said it so casually, but I knew what it was. A power play. See, we know where you are. We can reach you whenever we want. I agreed to meet them, not at my office, not at my home, never there, never there. I chose a sterile, overpriced hotel bar halfway between us. A place with no memories, no ghosts. When I walked in, I saw them immediately. They were holding court in a corner booth, just like they always did. My father, Richard Sterling, looked almost the same. A little grayer at the temples, maybe a few more lines around his eyes, but still radiating that same aura of impenetrable confidence. He wore a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car. He was a monument to his own success, cast in bronze and self-satisfaction. And Cole was his shadow, just like always. Dressed just as sharply, smiling that same easy smile. He was the handsome, affable face of the Sterling real estate empire. Dad was the power, Cole was the PR, I was the mistake they'd had to erase. My father's eyes locked onto mine as I approached. There was no warmth in them. There never was. It was the look of a master appraising a tool he'd long since discarded, wondering if it might still have some use. Ethan, he said, his voice a low rumble. You look, well. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment, a calculation. He was measuring the distance between the broken 18-year-old he'd cast out and the man standing before him now. I didn't sit down. What do you want? Cole gestured to the empty seat. Whoa, easy there, little brother. Can't we just have a drink? Catch up? We have nothing to catch up on, I said, my voice colder than I intended. The years of practiced detachment were kicking in, building a wall around the raw, wounded part of me that was screaming. My father sighed, a theatrical sound of paternal disappointment. He'd perfected it over a lifetime. Son, your brother is right. We're family. It's been too long. We've missed you. The words almost made me laugh. Missed me. They hadn't called. They hadn't written. They hadn't reached out once in 10 years. Not when I was sleeping in my car. Not when I was working 2 dead-end jobs just to afford Raymond a room in a flophouse in Houston. Not once. They didn't miss me. They needed something. To understand why I was standing there, feeling the rage and the hurt coiling in my gut like a snake, you have to understand my family. You have to understand what it was like growing up in the shadow of Richard Sterling. We lived in Westlake Hills, a suburb of Austin where the houses are large and the secrets are larger. From the outside, we were the perfect family. Richard Sterling was a legend in the Texas real estate world. He was on charity boards, his picture was in the society pages, and he cultivated an image of a tough but fair patriarch who had built his empire from scratch. My mother, who passed away from cancer when I was 12, was his beautiful, quiet wife, the perfect accessory. After she was gone, the house became a different kind of place, colder, sharper. My father's focus narrowed to two things, his business and his legacy. And to him, his legacy was Cole. Cole was 4 years older than me. He was everything I wasn't. He was handsome, athletic, and charismatic. He could walk into any room and own it. He was a natural salesman, a reflection of our father. I was quiet. I was good with numbers, with systems, with logic. I liked taking things apart to see how they worked. My father saw this as a weakness. He'd look at me, hunched over a computer or a book, and his lip would curl in this faint, almost imperceptible way. "You need to get out more, Ethan," he'd say. "Be more like your brother. No one ever got rich by hiding in the damn library." It was a constant drumbeat. "Why can't you be more like Cole?" At school, at the dinner table, at company parties he'd drag us to. Cole would be there, shaking hands, laughing, charming investors' wives. I'd be standing in a corner, feeling like I was wearing a suit made of sandpaper, just counting the seconds until I could disappear. The gaslighting was subtle at first. If I ever tried to voice an opinion that contradicted his, he wouldn't argue. He'd just give me this puzzled, pitying look. "Ethan, you're a smart kid, but you just don't understand how the world works. It's okay, you'll get it one day." He made me feel like my own thoughts were foreign, invalid. He wasn't just telling me I was wrong, he was telling me my entire perception of reality was flawed. Cole learned from the best. He'd borrow my things and then convince me I'd lost them. He'd twist my words in front of our father, making an innocent comment sound like an insult or a complaint. "Dad, I think what Ethan meant to say was..." He'd begin, reinterpreting me into a petulant, ungrateful child. And I, a kid desperate for my father's approval, started to believe it. I started to believe that maybe I was the problem, that my instincts were wrong, that my memories couldn't be trusted. That's learned helplessness. You stop trusting your own mind because the most powerful people in your life are telling you it's broken. The only time I ever felt seen was when I was with my mother. She was the one who bought me my first computer. She'd sit with me while I took apart old radios, her presence a warm, quiet shield against the crushing weight of my father's expectations. She understood that my quietness wasn't a flaw. When she died, that shield vanished. The house became my father's kingdom, and I was just a ghost haunting the halls. He started bringing me into the family business, Sterling Properties, when I was 16. Not to mentor me, but to use me. My knack for numbers, the thing he'd always belittled, was suddenly useful. I was put in a back office, tasked with reconciling accounts, building financial models for potential projects, and finding efficiencies in their bloated budgets. I was good at it, too good. I'd bring my analysis to him, showing him spreadsheets where the numbers didn't add up, pointing out creative accounting in certain project funds. I thought I was helping. I thought if I could just prove my worth, prove that my skills were valuable, he'd finally see me. Instead, he'd give me that same pitying look. "Ethan, this is the big leagues. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to get things done. You're thinking too small, too black and white." He'd take my work, pass it off as his own in board meetings, and then tell me to stick to the spreadsheets. Cole, meanwhile, was being groomed for the throne. He was given a fancy title, Vice President of Development, a corner office, and a six-figure salary to essentially take clients golfing. He was the face. I was the engine they kept hidden in the basement. The breaking point came when I was 18. It was a project called Willow Creek Estates. It was a massive residential development, and from the beginning, the numbers felt wrong. The loan agreements were predatory, the construction bids were wildly inflated, and the funds were being moved around through a series of newly created LCs that seemed designed to obscure, not clarify. I spent weeks building a full financial breakdown. I found a paper trail that showed money being funneled from the project into a separate company, a company whose sole director was Cole. I took the binder to my father's office, my heart pounding. I was terrified, but I felt a flicker of something else too, righteousness. I had found the problem. I could fix it. I could save him from Cole's recklessness. I laid it all out on his huge mahogany desk. I showed him the flow charts, the bank transfers, the Shell Corporation documents. I explained how Cole was skimming millions off the top. I thought he would be furious. I thought he would finally see that I was the loyal son, and Cole was the liability. He listened patiently, his face unreadable. When I was finished, he steepled his fingers and looked at me for a long moment. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Then he said, "You did good work, Ethan. Very thorough." A wave of relief washed over me. "So, what are we going to do?" I asked. "We," he said, standing up and walking over to the wet bar in his office, "are going to do nothing." He poured himself a whiskey, You, however, are going to take responsibility for this." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't do this. Cole did." He took a sip of his drink and turned to me, his eyes as cold and hard as granite. "The Willow Creek project is going under. The investors are getting nervous. They need someone to blame. It's not going to be my son and heir. It's going to be the quiet kid in the back office who could never quite cut it in the real world. The one who got overwhelmed and made some bad calls." The floor fell out from under me. "No," I whispered. You can't." "I can," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing calm. "I've already spoken to the lawyers. The LLC you've been managing the books for? The one all these bad deals are traced back to? You're the sole signatory on the account. We gave you that responsibility last year, remember? A little promotion, a chance to prove yourself." I remembered. I had been so proud. He'd made it seem like a huge vote of confidence. Now I saw it for what it was. A cage. They had been setting me up for months, but why? The word was pathetic, small. He actually looked irritated, as if my inability to grasp the sheer scale of his betrayal was a personal failing. "Because, Ethan, you are a liability. You don't fit. You ask too many questions. You see things you shouldn't see. Cole understands the game. He's my son, he's my legacy. You are a loose end, and I am tying you off." He told me the deal. I would sign a confession admitting to financial mismanagement and gross negligence. In return, he wouldn't press criminal charges. He would just let me go. I would be disowned, cut off from the family, with my name dragged through the mud. If I refused, he would unleash the full force of the Sterling legal team and make sure I spent the next decade in prison. He was gaslighting me on a grand scale. He had created a narrative where I was the architect of my own destruction. He presented it not as a monstrous betrayal, but as a sad but necessary consequence of my own incompetence. He almost had me believing it. That's the insidious power of it. For a split second I actually thought, maybe he's right. Maybe I did screw this up somehow. Cole came in then. He didn't even look at me, he just looked at Dad. "Is it done?" "It's done," my father said. He slid the prepared confession across the desk. "Sign it, Ethan." I looked from my father's cold, dead eyes to my brother's smug, triumphant face. And in that moment something inside me broke. The part that had spent a lifetime craving their approval, the part that believed they could be saved, it just died. I didn't sign it. I just turned and walked out. I walked out of the office, out of the building, and out of their lives. I went back to the house, packed a single bag and drove until the Austin skyline was a faint glimmer in my rearview mirror. He made good on his promise. The next day, the story was all over the local business journals. Sterling Properties ousts executive in wake of development collapse. My name was everywhere, linked to failure and incompetence. I was 18 years old, and my life was already ruined. I ended up in Houston, a city big enough to get lost in. The first year was a blur of misery. I slept in my beat-up car until I sold it for a few $100. I worked under the table washing dishes, cleaning hotel rooms, whatever I could find. I was drowning in shame, in the narrative they had written for me. I was a failure. My father was right. The turning point wasn't some grand epiphany. It was a small moment of grace. I was working as a night stalker at a 24-hour grocery store, a job that suited my desire to be invisible. The store's manager was a man named George. He was in his 60s, with a face like a road map and hands permanently stained with ink from doing the books. George was a former accountant who'd had his own business go bust years ago. He was quiet, but he saw things. He saw me, on my break, scribbling in a little notebook, trying to budget the pathetic handful of dollars I made each week. He saw me instinctively organizing the stockroom for maximum efficiency, creating systems no one had asked me to create. One night, he sat down next to me in the break room. "You're not a stock boy," he said, not unkindly. I just shrugged. "It's a job. Your brain is wasted here," he said, tapping his temple. "I see how you work. You see patterns. You see the numbers behind the numbers. What's your story?" I don't know why, but I told him. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the sheer loneliness. I told him everything, about my father, my brother, the setup. I expected him to look at me with pity, or worse, with disbelief. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "Men like your father," he said, his voice raspy. "They build their kingdoms on the bones of people they deem disposable. They can't stand anyone who sees the cracks in their foundation, so they don't just push you out. They have to destroy you. They have to make sure no one will ever listen to you." He was the first person who had ever validated my reality, the first person to tell me I wasn't crazy. George took me under his wing. He taught me about real accounting, not the creative kind my father practiced. He showed me how to read a balance sheet, how to spot fraud, how to build a business from the ground up, with honest numbers and hard work. He got me into a community college program. I worked at the store at night and went to school during the day. For the first time since my mother died, I felt like I had a purpose that was my own. It was a long, slow climb. After I got my degree, I started a small consulting business out of my tiny apartment. I specialized in logistics and data analysis for small businesses, the kind of back-office work my father had always despised. I helped them streamline their operations, manage their inventory, and find efficiencies. I wasn't building skyscrapers, but I was building something real, something honest. My business grew. Slowly at first, then all at once. I was good at what I did. I saved my clients money, and word got around. I hired my first employee, then my second. I finally moved out of Houston and back to Austin, not to their Austin, but to my Austin. I bought a small, sleek office downtown. Then I bought a quiet house on a quiet street, a world away from the opulent prisons of Westlake Hills. I had built a new life. I had become a new person. And I had almost managed to forget them. Until now. Back in the hotel bar, I stared at my father, the architect of my ruin, and my brother, the willing accomplice. 10 years of pain, of struggle, of rebuilding. All came flooding back. "All right," I said, finally taking a seat, my voice hard. "You wanted to talk, so talk. What do you want from me?" My father leaned forward, the mask of the benevolent patriarch firmly back in place. "Ethan, we made mistakes. I made mistakes. I was hard on you. I see that now. But the market, it's a different world than it was 10 years ago. Things have been difficult, I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Sterling Properties is in trouble." Cole jumped in, trying to smooth things over. "It's not in trouble, not really. It's a temporary downturn. A cash flow issue. We're restructuring, and we thought, with your business being what it is, we're old school. We thought maybe there was a synergy." There it was, the real reason. They weren't here to apologize. They were here for a lifeline. They saw my success, my stable, modern, debt-free business, and they wanted to absorb it. They wanted to lash my thriving company to their sinking ship and have me bail them out. "You want me to merge with you," I said, stating it plainly. "You want me to save you. We want to bring you back into the family, son," my father said, his voice layered with false sincerity. "Unite the Sterling name. Make us stronger than ever. All that business with Willow Creek. It was a long time ago. Water under the bridge. Water under the bridge." The phrase hung in the air between us, so absurd, so insulting, it was almost breathtaking. They had set a fire, burned my entire life to the ground, and now they were calling it water under the bridge. The anger I had been suppressing for a decade finally broke the surface. It wasn't hot and explosive, it was ice cold. "No," I said. The word dropped into the conversation like a stone. My father's face tightened. Cole's easy smile faltered. "No?" My father repeated, as if he'd never heard the word before. "No, I will not merge with you. I will not give you a dime. I will not have anything to do with you or your company. We are not family. You made that clear 10 years ago." My father's mask slipped. For a second I saw the man from that office, the tyrant. His eyes narrowed. "Don't be a fool, Ethan. You have a chance to come back home, to have your name mean something again. Don't throw it away out of some childish grudge. My name means something because of what I built," I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. "Not because of you. I built it in spite of you." He stood up then, his large frame looming over the table. The benevolent father was gone. This was Richard Sterling, the predator. "You think you're safe in your little glass tower? I made you, and I can break you all over again. I still have friends in this town. It wouldn't take much to remind them all of the incompetent little screw-up who almost bankrupted his own family. It was the same old threat, the same old weapon, shame. But I wasn't that scared 18-year-old anymore. His threats didn't work on me. They only made me stronger. "Is that a threat?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Cole, seeing this was going off the rails, tried to intervene. "Dad, come on." "Ethan, let's all just calm down." "Stay out of this, Cole," my father and I said at the exact same time. My father stared down at me, his jaw clenched. "It's a promise." He snarled. "You're either with us or you're against us. And you do not want to be against me." He turned and stormed out of the bar, Cole scrambling to follow him like a loyal dog. I just sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs. The adrenaline was coursing through me. For 10 years I had run from them. I had hidden. I had built my walls so high I thought they could never touch me, but they had. They had found me, and they had threatened me, trying to drag me back into their toxic world. He thought he could break me again. He thought I was still that boy in the back office. He was wrong. He had taught me a valuable lesson all those years ago. When you're dealing with predators, you don't just defend, and show attack. I sat in that soulless hotel bar for another 10 minutes, the ice in my untouched water glass melting. They had tried to ruin my future. Now, I was going to dig up their past. I was going to find out what really happened with Willow Creek Estates. I was going to find every skeleton in their closet. They had started a war. I was going to finish it. I pulled out my phone and made a call, not to a lawyer, not yet. I called a number I had been given years ago by a client, a number I had saved under a code name and hoped I'd never have to use. A woman with a crisp, no-nonsense voice answered on the second ring. Forensic Intelligence Group. How can I help you? My name is Ethan Sterling, I said, my voice steady and clear. I need to open an investigation, a financial crime investigation, into a company called Sterling Properties. There was a pause on the other end and then the sound of typing. Sterling Properties, she repeated. Of Austin? That's the one, I said, a grim sense of satisfaction settling over me. I want you to find everything, every shell company, every inflated invoice, every dirty deal. I want the whole damn house of cards. The silence was gone. My sanctuary had been breached. But as I walked out of that hotel and into the cool Texas night, I didn't feel fear. I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt powerful. The decision to hire Forensic Intelligence Group, or FIG, was like flipping a switch in a dark room. For 10 years, the past had been a shadowy, monstrous thing I refused to look at. Now, I was flooding it with light. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. The lead investigator on my case was a woman named Anya Sharma. She was a former FBI agent who specialized in white-collar crime, and she had an unnerving ability to listen that made you feel like she was reading your brain's source code. We met in a sterile conference room at her firm's office, a place that felt like it had been scrubbed clean of all human emotion. Before we begin, Mr. Sterling, she said, her eyes fixed on me, I need to be clear. Once we start digging, we can't unfind what we find. This will be expensive, it will be invasive, and it will likely get very, very ugly. Are you prepared for that? I thought of my father's face in that bar, twisted with rage and entitlement. I thought of the years I'd lost, the shame I'd carried. I'm prepared, I said. I want the truth. All of it. The investigation started with Willow Creek Estates, the project they'd used to crucify me. I gave Anya every scrap of memory I had, every document I'd ever seen. She and her team of forensic accountants and data miners descended into the digital ghost of my father's company. The first few weeks were quiet. I threw myself into my own work, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, but it was a flimsy facade. Every email, every phone call made me jump. I felt like I was living on a knife's edge, waiting for my father to make good on his threat. He didn't. There were no hit pieces in the business journals, no whispers from old contacts. There was only silence. It was a strategic silence, I knew. He was waiting for me to crawl back, to beg for his forgiveness. He had no idea what was coming. Anya's first report landed in my inbox 3 weeks later. It was a 50-page PDF, dense with financial jargon and legal analysis. I read it 3 times. Willow Creek was exactly what I'd thought it was. A premeditated bust. A scheme to defraud investors and a bank by taking out massive loans on an overvalued project, siphoning off the capital through a web of shell LLCs run by my brother, and then letting the whole thing collapse. My signature on that one LLC account was the linchpin. They had made me the fall guy, the perfect legally sound scapegoat. Reading it in black and white, confirmed by experts, was both horrifying and vindicating. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't incompetent. I was framed. The gaslighting had been a deliberate corporate strategy. The report confirmed something else too. The money Cole had siphoned? Over $4 million. That money hadn't just vanished. Anya's team traced it. It had been used as the seed capital for 3 new, ostensibly successful Sterling Properties developments over the next 5 years. They had used the money they stole in my name to fuel their growth. My ruin had been the fertilizer for their empire. I called Anya. This is it, I said, my voice tight. This is enough. It's enough to prove you were wronged, she said calmly. It's probably enough for a civil suit that you might win. But men like your father don't lose gracefully. He'll bury you in legal fees. He'll paint you as a bitter son trying to extort his family. It's damning, but it's not a kill shot. What's a kill shot? I asked. Criminal charges, she said, her voice dropping a little. Something the DA can't ignore. Loan fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. To get that, we need to go deeper. We need to look at everything. The whole 25-year history of the company. Do it, I said without hesitation. The next phase of the investigation was a deep dive. FIG put a team on it around the clock. They pulled public records, property deeds, tax filings, and corporate charters going back to the company's inception. They cross-referenced everything with a growing list of LLCs, partners, and political figures my father had been associated with. It was like watching archaeologists excavate a buried city, one dusty layer at a time. Meanwhile, I started to notice things. A black sedan parked down the street from my house for 2 days straight. I knew a consultant in my office building who asked a few too many questions. My father wasn't attacking my reputation publicly. He was trying to get leverage on me privately. He was looking for a weakness, a secret, something he could use to make me back down. It was a classic narcissist move. When your power is challenged, you don't reflect, you escalate. You seek to control and dominate. The paranoia started to creep in. I beefed up the security at my home and office. I started using encrypted communication. I felt like I was in a spy movie, but the enemy was my own family. The stress was immense. There were days I'd sit in my car in the parking garage, unable to go into my own office, my hands shaking, the old feelings of helplessness washing over me. The trauma bond is a powerful thing. Even though I knew my father was a monster, a part of me, the little boy who just wanted his dad's love, was terrified of what I was doing. But then I'd think of George, the grocery store manager. They have to destroy you to make sure no one will ever listen to you. I wasn't just doing this for revenge anymore. I was doing it to reclaim my own voice. 2 months into the deep dive, Anya called me. "You need to come in," she said. Her voice was different. The professional calm was gone. There was something else there. Shock. I drove to her office, my stomach in knots. The conference room was dark except for the glow of a large monitor. The wall was covered in a complex web of names, companies, and arrows, like something out of a detective show. It was a map of my father's secret world. "We found it," Anya said, pointing to a small, unassuming box in the middle of the web, the heart of the machine. The box was labeled the Sterling Family Foundation. I vaguely remembered it. My father had started it after my mother died. It was a charitable foundation in her name, dedicated to funding arts programs for underprivileged kids in Austin. It was his greatest PR tool. Whenever he was in the news for some ruthless business deal, he'd pivot and talk about the foundation, about giving back to the community, about honoring his late wife's memory. It was the source of his pristine public image. "Your father's company is a house of cards," Anya explained, walking me through the diagram on the wall. "He's been playing a shell game for decades. He uses inflated real estate appraisals to secure loans far exceeding the actual value of the properties. He then defaults on a portion of those loans, letting smaller banks take the hit, while funneling the excess cash through a labyrinth of shell companies. Willow Creek was just one of many. It's massive, systemic loan fraud." "But the foundation?" I asked. "How does that fit in?" Anya zoomed in on the diagram. My blood ran cold. "The foundation is the washing machine," she said. "The dirty money from these deals doesn't just go into his pocket. It gets donated to the foundation. From there, it's distributed in the form of grants and consulting fees to other companies. Companies secretly owned by your father and his associates. He uses his own wife's charity to launder the money he steals, all under the guise of philanthropy. He gets the tax write-off for the donation, he claims the money, and he gets to look like a saint while doing it." I sank into a chair, the air knocked out of me. It was diabolical. It was monstrous. He had taken the one pure thing, my mother's memory, and twisted it into the central gear of his criminal enterprise. All those years I had held on to this one idea that maybe, deep down, he had loved her. That the foundation was a genuine tribute. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. The man who wept at her funeral was the same man who was desecrating her name for profit. But that wasn't the worst of it. "There's more," Anya said, her voice gentle now. "We looked into the foundation's disbursements. Most of the money goes to the shell companies as we suspected. But there was one recurring payment we couldn't figure out. A monthly wire transfer to a private trust. We had to subpoena the bank records for the trust to see who the beneficiary was." She slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a bank statement. At the top was the name of the trust. At the bottom was the name of the sole beneficiary. "Cole Sterling. Your father has been paying your brother a salary out of the foundation's funds since he was 18, Anya said. $100,000 a year, tax-free, for the last 12 years. It's his allowance, paid for by the proceeds of fraud, laundered through your mother's legacy." I stared at the paper, the numbers blurring through a sudden film of tears. The anger was so immense, so pure, it felt like it was going to burn me up from the inside. All the years Cole had lorded his success over me. His fancy car, his expensive suits, his downtown condo. It was all a lie. He wasn't the brilliant heir. He was a parasite, feeding off the corpse of our mother's memory. My father hadn't just chosen Cole over me. He had subsidized him with stolen money while I was sleeping in my car. This was the kill shot. It took another month to assemble the final dossier. It was over 1,000 pages long, a meticulously documented, cross-referenced, and legally airtight account of 25 years of corruption. It contained bank statements, forged documents, secret ledgers, and sworn affidavits from 2 former Sterling Properties executives, that Fig had managed to track down and flip. The final piece was a recorded phone call. Anya's team, through means I did not ask about, had obtained a recording of a call between my father and Cole, made the day after our meeting at the hotel bar. I listened to it alone in the conference room. "He's not going to roll over," Cole was saying, his voice laced with panic. "He's changed, Dad. He's not that scared kid anymore. He's a child playing with a new toy," my father's voice boomed back, full of contempt. "He thinks his little data company makes him a man. I'll crush him. I'll leak the Willow Creek files myself if I have to. I'll remind this whole city what a pathetic failure he is." "And if that doesn't work?" Cole asked. There was a pause. Then my father's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "Then we find another way. Everyone has a breaking point, Cole. We just have to find his." I turned it off. That was all I needed to hear. The last shred of doubt, the last vestige of the trauma bond, evaporated. He wasn't just my father, he was my enemy, and he was trying to destroy me. I decided not to go to the DA, not yet. That would be justice, but it wouldn't be closure. I needed to see their faces. I needed them to know that it was me, the disposable son, the loose end, who was bringing their kingdom down. I was going to give them a choice. Not a choice between right and wrong, but a choice between two different kinds of ruin. I arranged the meeting. I told them I was ready to discuss a merger. I picked the place, my father's office, the scene of the original crime. I walked in, and it was exactly as I remembered. The mahogany desk, the smell of leather and whiskey, the framed photos of my father with governors and senators. They were both there, sitting behind the desk, a united front. They looked smug, victorious. They thought they had won. They thought I had crawled back. "Ethan," my father said, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. "I knew you'd see reason. Welcome home, son." I didn't say a word. I walked to the desk and placed two thick, spiral-bound dossiers on the polished wood. One in front of my father, one in front of Cole. They were copies of Anya's report. "What's this?" Cole asked, frowning. "It's a prospectus," I said, my voice even. "For the end of your company, and your lives as you know them." They opened the binders. I watched their faces as they started to read. I saw Cole's confident smirk melt into confusion, then into dawning horror. I saw my father's face go from condescending amusement to disbelief, to a pale, slack-jawed shock. His hands started to shake. The monument was cracking. I let them read for 10 minutes. I let them see the wire transfers, the forged appraisals, the diagram of the foundation. I let them see the transcript of their own phone call. Finally, my father looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and pure, unadulterated hatred. "How?" he whispered. "You said it yourself," I replied, quoting him. "I'm a smart kid. I see patterns. I see the numbers behind the numbers. You just never bothered to look." Cole was white as a sheet. "What do you want, Ethan?" he stammered. "Money? You can have it. Whatever you want." "What I want," I said, leaning forward, my hands flat on the desk, "is everything you took from me. And everything you stole from her." I pointed to the large, smiling portrait of my mother on the wall. I laid out my terms. There would be no negotiation. Term number 1. They would immediately sign over 90% of their shares in Sterling Properties, and all its subsidiaries to a new holding company controlled by me. The remaining 10% would be put into a trust for the employees who were about to lose their jobs. Term number 2. They would both sign letters of resignation, effective immediately, citing personal health reasons. They would issue a public statement praising me for stepping in to steward the company into a new era. Term number 3. They would cede all control of the Sterling Family Foundation to a new, independent board of directors that I would appoint. "And if we don't?" my father snarled, some of his old bluster returning. "If you don't," I said, pulling a flash drive from my pocket and placing it on the desk, "this entire dossier, along with the original audio of your phone call, gets hand-delivered to the USC Attorney's Office, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and the top investigative reporter at the Austin American-Statesman. I suspect you'll both be in federal prison before Christmas. Your assets will be seized, your names will be synonymous with scandal, and the only legacy you'll leave behind is shame." I gave them the choice: a quiet, humiliating defeat, or a spectacular, public immolation. They could fade away into obscurity with a fraction of their wealth, or they could lose everything and die in prison. My father stared at me, his chest heaving. In his eyes I saw it all. The rage, the panic, the utter disbelief that he, Richard Sterling, had been outmaneuvered by the son he had written off. He had built his world on the idea of his own superiority, his own invincibility. And I had shattered it. The narcissistic injury was so profound he looked like he was having a stroke. Cole broke first. He was a coward, always had been. "We'll do it," he sobbed, pushing the papers forward. "Just don't send it. Please, Ethan. Please, Ethan." My father didn't say a word. He just picked up a pen, his hand trembling so badly he could barely hold it, and he signed. He signed away his company, his legacy, his name. He signed away everything. The aftermath was exactly as I'd planned. It was quiet. The business world was surprised by the sudden retirement of Richard Sterling, but the narrative I crafted held. I was the prodigal son, returned to save the family business. The irony was so thick, I could taste it. I didn't save Sterling Properties. I dismantled it. I liquidated every asset, paid off every creditor, and set up severance packages for every employee. I took the shell companies apart piece by piece until nothing was left but dust. The foundation was my real project. I appointed a board of legitimate community leaders and philanthropists. We branded it as the Eleanor Sterling Memorial Fund. With the capital I recovered from my father's hidden accounts, we started funding real programs. Building libraries, providing scholarships, supporting arts education. I used the money he had stolen to truly honor her memory. I washed the filth off her name with good deeds. I never saw my father again. I heard he and Cole moved to a small town in East Texas, living in a modest house bought with the small portion of their assets I had let them keep. Richard Sterling, the Titan of Austin, was gone, erased, replaced by a bitter old man in a town that didn't know his name. Cole tried to contact me once a few years later, an email full of self-pity and blame. He said I had ruined their lives. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the email to my lawyer and had him send a cease and desist letter. I was done forming boundaries. Now I was enforcing them with concrete and steel. It's been 5 years since that day in my father's office. My own company has flourished. I have a life I never thought possible. A wife, a daughter, a home filled with light and laughter. The quiet is back, but it's a different kind of quiet now. It's not the silence of loneliness or fear. It's the silence of peace. The silence of a war that is finally, truly over. Sometimes when I'm tucking my daughter into bed, I think about the man I used to be, that broken kid who believed he was worthless, and I feel a pang of sadness for him. But I also feel a deep, abiding pride, because he didn't stay broken, he got up, he fought back. He learned that the only person who gets to write your story is you. My father tried to erase me. Instead, I erased him. And in the space he left behind, I built a better world.